now my distinct pleasure to introduce another member of the UTMB family, a member of the class of 1971 and today's commencement speaker, Dr. Bernard Morrey. Dr. Morrey says he has many fond memories of his days at UTMB, including working with then Dean Truman Blocker on securing a commencement speaker and serving as his class president. Dr. Morrey's own graduation was particularly meaningful as he was a gold-headed cane finalist. Dr. Morrey says UTMB trained him well for his career as an orthopedic surgeon, a career that has been stellar by any measure. Dr. Morrey is another one of those physicians I mentioned earlier who has contributed to other fields. Before coming to medical school, he was a NASA aerospace engineer at the Johnson Spacecraft Center, where he worked on Apollo 13. He holds a master's degree in biomechanical orthopedics and was named a Fulbright Scholar in 1987. Dr. Morrey holds 5 patents and serves as a consultant for the National Football Players Association. He is a personal physician to former President George H. Bush and his wife Barbara, and he has served as president of the American Orthopedic Association. Dr. Morrey's extensive accomplishments are listed in the program, but there is one not listed I would like to share with you, and this comes from our very own Burke Evans. Those of you who know Burke know that he is not prone to compliments or effusive statements. He describes Dr. Morrey as an excellent person, an almost perfect human being. I can't think of one negative thing about him. Members of the class of 2008 School of Medicine faculty, family, and friends, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you one of our own, Dr. Bernard Morrey.
Thank you, Dean Anderson. President Callender, Dean Anderson, distinguished faculty, alumni, distinguished alumni, parents, friends, and especially graduates. Well, congratulations. I grew up in Fort Worth, as was mentioned, and spent some years just north at NASA, then had 4 wonderful years here at the UTMB. And I can tell you it's a distinct pleasure and an honor for me to return in this capacity at this time. I can remember sitting out there, and I don't remember everything I was thinking, but I do remember one thought. The only thing standing between me and that diploma is this guy's talk. So I'll try to be somewhat brief. I do remember one event of that day. My family came down, my wife's family came down, and she's with us here today. And we were having a meal, and I was thinking, I must be the man. This is a wonderful day, and I'm going to be a doctor. And so I was thinking about that. I looked over, and I saw our son turning blue. And I thought, well, that's interesting, a blue baby. And as I was kind of working through the differential diagnosis that would allow me to arrive at a treatment plan, my wife very calmly reaches over and grabs a wad of biscuit from his throat. Well, he turns pink, I turn a little bit red, and I think I might be the man, but I haven't arrived. But you have arrived. Here you are today. You must be terribly proud of yourselves, and you certainly have every right to be, along with your parents and your friends and all those faculty that have supported you along the way. And I'm really honored to have an opportunity to share some thoughts with you today on this most special of occasions. And as I was thinking about this, what can I tell you that'll make a difference? I mean, you've been through 4 years at Galveston. Maybe there's nothing I can say. So I thought, well, what did my commencement speaker say? And the problem was I couldn't quite remember, and I couldn't remember even who it was. And you may notice from the introductory comments that's kind of embarrassing because I was on the selection committee. So we have a son that graduated from medical school 4 years ago, and he's with us today, Matthew. And I said, hey, Matt, do you remember, who was your commencement speaker? And what did he say? He said, Dad, I don't have a clue. So we have another son that graduated from medical school last year. So I said, hey, Mark, do you remember who your commencement address speaker was and what he said? Well, he's just a year out, so he remembered that the guy was from Atlanta, and he talked about disease patterns and how they've changed. So I thought, boy, the content of a commencement speaker's address has a pretty short half-life. But I don't want that to be the case. I actually want you to remember what I'm about to tell you, because I want you to live what I'm about to tell you. And I'd like to dedicate my comments to E. Burke Evans, because he was one of my first mentors in medicine and in orthopedics, and to all those other physicians who have helped me along the way to understand what it means to be a physician, what it means to be a member of this very, very special profession. And so now here you are, and you're about to begin your journey, and that my topic officially is Quo Vadis, Quo Vadimus. Now, you might recognize, of course, that's Latin, and you would appropriately say, what's with the Latin? Well, one reason is I took Latin for 8 years, and I never get to use it. We don't speak it around the house that much anymore, and the fact is I haven't used it in 8 years, so I thought, well, this would be an opportunity at least to use 2 words. And I even had to have a little help with spelling of one of the words. But the message is pretty important, and the message is, where are you going? And where you go, we go, the profession. Unfortunately, as I was thinking about that, it also occurred to me that's probably one of the most common themes of all commencement addresses, is to liken your career to a journey. But I think it's appropriate because that's kind of the way it is. It's a very good analogy. Because what do we know about a journey? What do we know about the path you're about to take? Well, first of all, there's preparation, and you've prepared for this. That preparation, you may or may not recognize, started many years ago when you were just little kids, because that's when you defined who you were and what was important to you. It's when you defined your values. And somewhere along the line, you decided to take your values and your intelligence and apply it to a greater good. And I commend you for that. And then you got through college, and you got good enough grades to get into medical school. And then you showed great judgment. You came here, one of the finest medical schools in the country for many, many reasons. And now you're at the brink. You're about to start your journey. And you're well prepared. But I do want to share one concern. And the concern is that there are extrinsic pressures that are going to influence us in our profession. You're about to be a member of the most ancient and honored of all professions. Well, I recognize there's some debate about what's the oldest profession. And in my days here, that profession was plied on the island in Post Office Street. And I don't know if it still is. But certainly there's no more respected profession than what you're about to enter. And why is it respected? Well, obviously, you touch people's lives. You touch society. Patients will come to you, and you will make them better. Some patients will come to you, and you'll heal those patients. Occasionally, not too often, but sometimes you may save a life. What do the patients expect from you? Well, they know you're smart, so they expect that you have the knowledge to make the diagnosis and to know what's wrong with them. They expect that you'll have the judgment to know what to do, to develop a treatment plan. They also expect that you have the talent and the experience to execute the plan. These are reasonable expectations of a profession, even of a profession as august as ours that's responsible for healing. But they have another expectation. And that expectation is that your behavior will be professional. Now, I'm not talking about your mannerism. What I'm really talking about is your motives. Why do you do what you do? Why do you make the decisions about patient care that you make? Now, you're really fortunate, as I said, because this topic is an integral part of your curriculum. And you have this wonderful tradition of the Gold-Headed Cane Award, which was mentioned. I was honored to have been a finalist. It's one of the most significant recognitions of my career. And I really respect Galveston and UTMB for maintaining this award because I think it says volumes. As you go forward, as you go through this journey, remember there will be extrinsic pressures that challenge what you have been taught and challenge who you are. And these are pretty substantive. They include the federal government, for goodness sake. The federal government is responsible for funding much of our health care today, and therefore they're very carefully scrutinizing that spend. And I think that's probably appropriate. They've introduced recently something called pay for performance. Well, that's kind of interesting. I think it's a great idea. I suppose everybody does. How do you measure? It's a different story. And since it's a government program, we can rest assured it'll almost certainly be done wrong. But why are they doing this? Well, to be very honest, I think because to some extent our own profession has failed. Why is the profession not responsible for controlling cost? Why is the profession not responsible for guaranteeing that the outcomes flow from the judgment? That really should be on us, not the federal government. Then you go to the other end of the spectrum, you look at the legal profession. And of course, we recognize we're the most litigious societies of all times, and certainly any place on this globe. That has a tremendous impact on us, doesn't it? Because, first of all, and what I really dislike most, is it erodes the doctor-patient relationship. And I find that really, really sad. But it also has an impact on our decision-making. Insurance companies. Insurance companies decide who we see. They even decide what kind of test we can order. And then the ultimate, in some instances, what kind of care we can deliver. That's supposed to be on us, not on them. And what's their motive? It's financial. And what about the business of medicine, the industry? It's really sad, isn't it, that moving forward and the technology that we're supposed to develop to improve the patient care requires a partnership with industry. But what's happened to that partnership? Sadly, at least to some extent, it's run amok. And it's difficult to distinguish what relationships are appropriate and what are inappropriate with industry. We must have some relationship with industry, but it's been declared, and appropriately so in some instances, that sometimes relationships are inappropriate, and it affects our motives, and it affects our decision-making. And I'll add one more extrinsic thread, if I might, and that's just technology, particularly the technology of communication. Because we've got this tighter and tighter spiral that doesn't give us any time to think. And if nothing else, as physicians caring for patients, every once in a while you got to stop and think. And ideally, you should think in a quiet environment where you can really arrive at the right decision. Well, we don't have much time anymore. Since I started my comments, I know the phones are off, but how many of you, hopefully none behind me or directly in front of me, but way out there, have been glancing down at your Blackberries to find out what the latest message from whoever, rather than being in the moment? I think this is a threat to our profession. But, you know, these threats don't mean anything unless anything sinister, unless we react inappropriate to them. That's our behavior. So what do we do about this? Well, you've started because you trained here. And you've been taught what it means to have professional behavior, and more importantly, professional motivation. You have a gold-headed cane, a wonderful, wonderful tradition. And by having that tradition, you have defined your classmate that you think epitomizes and embodies the very best of this profession. Don't ever forget his name. Don't ever forget what the symbolism of that award is. So I guess I've kind of mentioned some things to be concerned about. One of the things that has bothered me a little bit when I've been in administrative roles is that people would come in and point out problems and usually point out the obvious, which I basically consider to be complaining. And I'd always kind of wish they would offer a solution. I mean, because it isn't that hard to identify problems usually. And so that's pretty much all I've done, I guess. So I want to offer a little bit of a solution. I'll give you kind of a broad framework and then a bit of a focus. And it's really simple stuff. First of all, recognize that there's been some erosion of our professional standards because of the way we have elected to respond to these pressures. Second of all, recognize that that erosion is on us. It's our responsibility. We can't blame the lawyers. We can't blame government. We must blame ourselves. Third, that where we go from point A to point B occurs gradually. How you live your life as a profession, how you work down the path of your profession and the specialty that you choose, will be predicated on each decision you make about your patient and what motivates that decision. It'll very, very rarely be one major event that's pivotal that you can either go left or right. It occurs gradually. Now, you'll be pleased to know that I want to close. And I want to close with a comment that I think best epitomizes my message. And I'm going to draw on one of the founders of the Mayo Clinic, a surgeon, William J. Mayo. And he was given a commencement address to Rush Medical School in Chicago. And he closed his comments with 14 words. I'd actually like you to remember the words because that's my message. And he said very simply, remember, the best interest of the patient is the only interest to be considered. So on this day, revel in your good fortune. Share this with your families who also deserve to share this wonderful day. Enjoy this wonderful accomplishment. But starting tomorrow, you've got to start down the path. My hope and prayer for you is that you end your career with the same idealism and the same enthusiasm as you started it. And remember, the best interest of the patient is the only interest to be considered. Thank you and Godspeed.